Mom, are you enjoying the lake house I gave you? I froze. What house? I never received anything. His wife, Victoria, drifted closer, her expression unreadable. Stay with me to the end of this story, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far it travels. I never imagined a single question could unravel everything I believed about my life. For 2 years, I'd been scraping by on my modest janitorial wages, stretching medication, wearing the same winter coat, convincing myself things would improve. My son David, meanwhile, had built a thriving tech firm with over 200 employees. I was proud of him, even if our calls had dwindled to quick updates about meetings and client dinners. After his father passed, he buried himself in work, and I tried to understand. That Thanksgiving, I prepared every one of his favorite dishes, even though it meant skipping lunches for a week. When David stepped inside, everything about him, his watch, his shoes, even the casual sweater, spoke of success. Behind him came Victoria, elegant in a cream coat and perfectly styled hair. Dinner began with cheerful talk of business expansion and European trips. I smiled, but each detail reminded me how far apart our lives had grown. Then, as I served the pumpkin pie, David leaned back and asked the question that stopped my breath. Mom, how do you like the lake house I put in your name 2 years ago? I stared at him, heart racing. Lake house? I never received any house. David's smile faded. He glanced at Victoria, who suddenly rose, muttering about a phone call and slipping into the kitchen. Something in her hurried movement made my stomach tighten. That's impossible, David said. I had my assistant transfer the deed and set up monthly support payments. Payments? My voice shook. I've been sending you $1,500 every month. Haven't you been getting it? The room tilted. 2 years of payments, enough to ease every worry, had never reached me. I swear, David, I haven't seen a dime, I whispered. I've been choosing between groceries and the electric bill. His face went pale. I have receipts, transfers, everything. From the kitchen came only silence. I rose on unsteady legs and followed the sound of nothing. Victoria stood with her back to us, phone in hand but no words on her lips. And she turned, her cheeks were flushed. Is everything all right? She asked. David's voice changed, calm but sharp, the way he spoke in boardrooms when he sensed someone was hiding the truth. Victoria, he said slowly, you helped with the lake house paperwork, didn't you? The room went silent. Victoria's polished smile trembled. Her fingers twisted her wedding band until her knuckles turned white. I caught the guilt in her eyes long before she spoke. There must be some mix-up, she murmured. Maybe the bank made an error. But years of night shifts as a janitor had taught me to read people who thought no one was watching. She wasn't telling the truth. David pulled out his phone. I'm calling Rebecca. She handled the transfer. No, wait, Victoria said quickly, stepping forward. Let's talk privately first. Your mom doesn't need more stress if this is a simple mistake. I kept my voice even. Victoria, we're far past worrying about my feelings. I need to know where my house is. David was already dialing. A moment later, his assistant's voice came through on speaker. Yes, Mr. Harrison. The property at 1247 Lake Morrison Drive was transferred to Margaret Harrison on November the 15th, 2 years ago. I have the signed documents. Monthly payments of $1,500 have been sent to the account on file since then. My stomach dropped. I don't have an account ending in 4782, I said when she read the last digits. Mine ends in 9156. David's eyes locked on Victoria. Rebecca, who gave you that account number? Your wife, sir. Mrs. Harrison called in December 2 years ago and asked me to update the records. The phone trembled in David's hand. Rebecca continued. The deed was mailed to 847 Maple Street, apartment 2B. I'd never lived on Maple Street. David ended the call. The silence was heavier than anger. Explain, he said. Victoria's composure cracked. Tears spilled, more frantic than regretful. David, please. My parents were about to lose their home. My father's medical bills were crushing them. I only meant to borrow the money, just for a while. We needed the lake house as a temporary place to stay. You weren't using it. Borrow? I whispered. You mean you took it? Her voice rose. I was going to pay it back, but the words rang hollow. Something inside me shifted. The final break of a trust I'd spent years protecting. I looked straight at Victoria. I've been working double shifts just to afford my medicine, I said quietly. 1 meal a day so the grocery money lasts. I keep the heat at 60 degrees because I can't pay the electric bill. David turned to his wife, disbelief hardening into something colder. Victoria, my mother could have died. What if she'd had a medical emergency? She's fine, Victoria blurted, voice high and shaky. She's healthy. My father has diabetes and heart issues. He needed the money more. The words hit me like a slap. Fine? Healthy? I thought of nights lying awake, chest tight with stress, deciding which prescription I could skip. I thought of standing in the grocery aisle, calculator in hand, putting food back. Where is my house now? I asked. Victoria's mascara streaked as she finally answered. My parents are living there. My brother's family, too. They've been renovating it. David's face was unreadable. For 2 years, I said, my voice thin. I believed my son was just busy. I told myself he didn't need to worry about me anymore. I was proud of his independence, while I scraped by alone. All this time, he thought he was taking care of me. David's voice cracked. Mom, I'm so sorry. I thought you had everything you needed. I saw the little boy who once promised he'd look after me. He'd tried to keep that promise, only to have it stolen. How much? I asked Victoria. She hesitated, then whispered, all of it. $36,000 in the house. David stood slowly, every movement controlled. Pack your things, he said. We're leaving tonight. David, please, she begged. I'll make it right. I'll pay her back. With what money? He asked, stepping away from her grasp. You haven't worked a single day since we married. Everything you and your family have lived on was taken from my mother. I watched her crumble and felt nothing. No pity, no triumph. Just emptiness where trust used to be. For 2 years she'd sat at this very table, smiling while her family lived in comfort on what was meant to keep me afloat. When the door finally closed behind her, the house grew silent. Not peaceful, but heavy, as if the betrayal itself clung to every wall. David wanted to call his lawyer at once, but I stopped him. Not yet, I said. We need to know everything first. People who steal rarely stop at one crime. The next morning I called in sick for the first time in years. David returned with boxes of records and his laptop. We spread them across the same dining table where Victoria had played the perfect daughter-in-law just hours earlier. On top lay the deed to the lake house. My signature was there, clear and confident, on a document I had never seen. I studied it carefully and felt a chill. That isn't my handwriting, I whispered. Look at the M in Margaret, I said, pointing to the deed. I always add a little loop. This one is just straight lines. David snapped a photo of the signature, then pulled out an old birthday card I'd signed. The difference was subtle but clear once you knew where to look. She forged your name, he said, his voice flat with fury. He dug deeper. The bank records showed every monthly payment landing in an account under my name, at a bank I'd never used. I need to see this account, I said. The bank refused details over the phone, so David drove me there himself. My hands trembled as we walked into the marble-floored lobby of First National Bank. I handed over my ID and social security card. The representative scrolled through the file, frowning. This account was opened a little over 2 years ago, she said. Address on file, 847 Maple Street, apartment 2B. Phone number doesn't match yours. And the signature. She turned the screen so we could see. Ma'am, you've never been to this branch before, have you? Never, I replied. The signature card bore the same false version of my name. This is identity theft, the representative said gently. You need to file a police report. But the theft went deeper. David had also been sending extra help. $500 for new glasses, $800 for dental work, $1,000 as a holiday gift, none of which I'd ever received. How much in total? I asked, bracing myself. David calculated, his face draining of color. $43,000, he whispered. $43,000, more money than I'd ever had, enough to change everything. We drove to 847 Maple Street, a rundown complex with cracked concrete steps and a flickering neon sign. Apartment 2B stood empty, a for rent notice taped to the window. She probably leased it just long enough to set up the fake address, David said through clenched teeth. But one question chilled me even more. How did she get my personal details? My social security number, my birth date? David's jaw tightened. From our house. I keep family documents in my office. She had access to everything. The betrayal cut deeper with each discovery. Victoria hadn't just seized an opportunity, she'd planned this. She lived in my son's home, smiled across our dinner table, and quietly stole my identity. That evening, we sat surrounded by piles of evidence. David's eyes filled with tears. "Mom, I'm so sorry." I trusted her completely. I never even checked if you were getting the money. She was the one who suggested it. That detail hit me like ice water. "She suggested it?" He nodded. "About 6 months after Dad passed, she said she was worried about you living alone. She thought it would be a wonderful gesture if I helped with your expenses. She even offered to coordinate everything with my assistant." I closed my eyes as the full scope of her manipulation settled over me. She'd posed as the devoted daughter-in-law, concerned for my well-being, while funneling every dollar into her family's pockets. Even the lake house idea had been hers. She found the property, negotiated the price, handled the paperwork. She had played my son like a violin, using his love for me as the perfect cover. Later, after David left to meet with his lawyer, I sat alone in my small living room. The old furniture and sputtering air conditioner felt like a cage. This wasn't supposed to be my life. I should have been relaxing by the lake, able to buy my medication without counting coins. Instead, somewhere out there, Victoria's parents were probably sitting on that stolen porch, enjoying a view that should have been mine. Knowing the truth, painful as it was, felt like the first step toward getting my life back. Victoria hadn't just taken money. She'd stolen 2 years of security and dignity, the quiet confidence that my son was looking out for me. Tomorrow we'd begin the fight to reclaim it all. Tonight, for the first time in 2 years, I went to bed knowing exactly where I stood. And that knowledge, bitter as it was, felt like strength. The next morning, while I was scrubbing office floors, David's lawyer called. "We need to meet immediately," Mr. Patterson said, his voice tight. "What we've uncovered goes far beyond what we suspected." David picked me up after my shift, dark circles under his eyes. At the law office, a thick file waited on the table. "Mrs. Harrison," Mr. Patterson began, "Victoria hasn't just stolen funds. She's been running a small fraud scheme in your name." The room seemed to sway as he explained. Victoria had opened 3 bank accounts, applied for credit cards, taken out a loan, and even filed false tax returns using my identity. The IRS had been sending notices to the fake address, and on paper, I was now under investigation for unreported income. I gripped the chair to steady myself, but I filed honestly every year. "We know," he said gently. "The records show otherwise until we prove the fraud." David's hands curled into fists. "How much in total?" "Approximately $78,000, Mr. Patterson replied, flipping through pages. "That includes the original $43,000 plus credit charges, the loan, and fraudulent refunds. $78,000, more than 4 years of my wages cleaning floors." "And the house?" David asked. "The property is legally in your name," the lawyer said. "The deed was forged. Her family has been living there, using the stolen funds to renovate and raise its value." I thought of Victoria's parents, the polite couple I'd met only twice. Did they know the truth? "Can we get it back?" David pressed. "Yes, but this isn't just a civil dispute. We'll need law enforcement. It's criminal fraud and identity theft." I sat silently, remembering the tears Victoria had shed at my table. Were they ever real? "What about her family?" I finally asked. "They'll have to leave the property," Mr. Patterson said. "If they can prove ignorance of the theft, they may avoid charges, but they cannot keep a house bought with stolen funds." David stared out the window. "Where is she now?" "Our investigator confirmed she's at the lake house," the lawyer replied. So she had run straight to the very place purchased with what she stole. That afternoon we drove to Lake Morrison. I had never seen the house meant for me. As we turned down the long driveway, my breath caught. A beautiful ranch-style home stood before us, its wide windows reflecting the water, gardens perfectly kept. This was the peaceful haven David had imagined for my retirement. A life of sunsets over the lake instead of cold nights counting pennies. Victoria's father opened the door. His face fell the instant he recognized us. When the door opened, Victoria's father stood there, shoulders sagging. "Oh," he said quietly, "we've been expecting you." Victoria appeared behind him, smaller and younger than I'd ever seen her. Her designer clothes were gone, just jeans and an old sweater, her face swollen from crying. "Margaret," she whispered, I'm so sorry." I studied the woman who had smiled at me across countless dinner tables while secretly draining away my security. "Are you?" I asked. "Or are you only sorry you were caught?" Tears streamed down her cheeks, but I'd seen those tears before. I felt nothing but cold anger. "It started as borrowing," she sobbed. "Just the first payment to help my parents. I planned to put it back." "You didn't," David said, voice like ice. "You forged documents, opened accounts, filed false returns. That isn't borrowing. That's fraud." Victoria's mother stepped forward, her own face streaked with shock. "We didn't know," she pleaded. "We thought David was simply generous." Victoria told us he insisted on buying the house. I looked at the older woman and saw genuine horror. She truly hadn't known. "The IRS believes I've hidden income because of what your daughter did," I said softly. "I could have faced prison." Her mother gasped, covering her mouth. "Oh my! Victoria, what have you done?" Mr. Patterson entered with a briefcase of documents. "Mrs. Stevens," he said firmly, "you and your family must vacate this property within 30 days. Anything purchased with stolen funds must be returned or repaid. Law enforcement will arrive tomorrow. I recommend your daughter surrender voluntarily." Victoria turned to David, eyes wide with panic. "Please don't let them take me. I'll pay everything back. I'll work day and night." David shook his head. "With what? You've never worked a day since we met. Everything you have came from stealing from my mother." As we left, I glanced back at the beautiful lake house that should have been mine for 2 years. Soon it would be, but it felt tainted now. "Mom," David said quietly as we drove away, "I'll make sure you never struggle again. I'll take care of you the way I should have all along." I squeezed his hand. "You already did, sweetheart. It's not your fault. She took what you gave." Months later, on a gray February morning, the final chapter closed. In a quiet courthouse hallway, David's lawyer emerged with the news. "It's done," he said. "The marriage is dissolved. All assets bought with stolen funds revert to their rightful owner. Mrs. Harrison, you now legally own the lake house. The remaining funds are frozen for restitution." David exhaled, relief and sorrow mixing in his eyes. "What about her family?" I asked. "They moved out last week," the lawyer replied. "They've been cooperative, and they're heartbroken." I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that the nightmare was ending. Sadness for the innocent people swept up in Victoria's choices. The weeks that followed were filled with paperwork and adjustments. But one truth anchored me. Justice had finally arrived, and the life my son had meant for me was, at last, truly mine. David threw himself into setting things right with the same drive he once poured into building his company. He hired accountants to unwind the false tax filings, worked with the IRS to clear my name, and personally oversaw every step of transferring the lake house back to me. But the biggest change wasn't legal, it was personal. The son who once called only between meetings now stopped by every few days. He took me to doctor's appointments, insisted on grocery runs, and called every night just to check in. "You don't have to hover, honey," I teased one afternoon as he folded one of my old quilts. "I'm not going anywhere." He paused, hands resting on the fabric. "Mom, I missed 2 years of your life because I trusted the wrong person. I'm not missing anymore." I understood his guilt, though he didn't deserve it. Victoria had been a master manipulator, and rebuilding trust, especially in yourself, takes time. Moving into the lake house felt almost unreal. The place was stunning, with gardens kept in perfect shape and a new screened porch that overlooked the water. David offered to repaint walls and replace furniture, anything to make it truly mine. But no new curtains could erase the thought of Victoria's family living there while I scraped by 50 miles away. Sorting out the stolen funds turned into months of forensic accounting. When everything settled, my advisor estimated I'd receive about $95,000. My son's original gifts, plus interest and compensation for the identity theft. I had never imagined holding that kind of security, enough to stop worrying about groceries or medication. Yet the money felt heavy, touched by everything it represented. The hardest part wasn't financial. It was the town's reaction. News of Victoria's arrest had been front-page gossip. Some neighbors were kind and outraged on my behalf. Others looked at me with quiet suspicion, as if I should have known. A few even acted as though I'd won the lottery, forgetting the years of fear and humiliation behind every dollar. I kept my head down and focused on rebuilding. The first night alone in the lake house, I sat on the screened porch with a cup of tea, watching the sun sink into the water. It was beautiful, peaceful in a way I'd never known, yet I felt like a guest in someone else's dream. My phone buzzed. David again. "How are you feeling, Mom?" I searched for words. "Grateful," I said at last, and sad, and angry, and confused, all at once. "That sounds about right," he replied softly. After a pause, he added, "You know, I keep thinking about what Victoria said that last day, how she never meant for it to go so far." I remembered her tears with frantic apologies. "What about it?" I asked. "I think she might have been telling the truth about that part," he said. I let the silence stretch, the lake reflecting the fading light. Maybe she hadn't planned to ruin so many lives, but choices, once made and hidden, have a way of carrying their own momentum. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. The damage was real, but so was the freedom that came from knowing the full story, and finally, truly, moving forward. "I think she really did start small and just couldn't stop," David said on the phone one evening. "But that doesn't make it better. It makes it worse. She had chance after chance to come clean." He was right. Maybe the first withdrawal had been desperation, but every choice after that was calculated. Victoria had hugged me at holidays, listened to my worries about money, and proudly described the improvements her family was making on a house bought with what she'd stolen. "She wasn't only stealing from you, Mom," David added quietly. "She stole the relationship we should have had these past 2 years. She stole the peace of mind I thought I was giving you." After we hung up, I walked through the home that was now legally and unquestionably mine. It was beautiful. Bright rooms, polished floors, gardens that framed the water like a painting. But it would take time before it felt like home instead of evidence of betrayal. That night I slept in the master bedroom for the first time. With enough money in the bank to last my lifetime, you might think I'd feel triumphant. Instead, I felt simply spent. But it was the good kind of exhaustion, the kind that follows a long, brutal journey when you finally reach the other side. A year later, I stood on the same screened porch where I'd spent that first uneasy night, and everything had changed. I'd replaced the furniture, added plants of my own choosing, and hung photos that told my story. Each morning I savored coffee while the sunrise painted the lake in shifting colors. Peace, a luxury I'd once thought impossible, had become my everyday life. Right on schedule, David's car crunched up the driveway for our weekly breakfast. "Morning, Mom," he called, carrying a bakery bag. "Cinnamon rolls from Mrs. Chen. She always asks about you." I smiled, setting 2 plates on the table. "You don't have to spoil me every week. I can feed myself now." "I know," he said with a grin, "but I like bringing them. Besides, half the town considers you their favorite comeback story." It was true. The same neighbors who once whispered during Victoria's trial now stopped me in the grocery store to ask how I was settling in. They brought casseroles, shared gardening tips. Even the mailman offered congratulations when he had good news to deliver. "Any word from the lawyer about her appeal?" I asked. David shook his head. "Her attorney filed the paperwork, but Mr. Patterson says it's just routine." The evidence was overwhelming. She pled guilty. She'll serve her full sentence. 18 months had sounded short when the judge announced it. But as the seasons turned and my new life took root, I stopped counting her days and started counting my own blessings. "How do you feel about that?" David asked, studying me. I thought carefully. A year ago, I might have wanted her to suffer more, to pay a price equal to the damage she'd done. But now, sitting in the house that was truly mine with my son across the table, revenge seemed small. "She's where she needs to be," I said at last. "Not because I want her to hurt, but because she needs to face real consequences." Through the court process, I learned more than I ever wanted about her past. A childhood of financial struggle and constant comparisons to families with more. When she married David, she suddenly had access to comfort she'd never imagined. But apparently it still wasn't enough. She needed to be the one providing, the savior of her own family. I looked around the sunlit kitchen and felt a quiet certainty settle in. This home was no longer a symbol of loss. It was proof that even after betrayal, you can reclaim your life, build something new, and choose peace over anger. The therapist her lawyer recommended called it entitlement syndrome, the belief that life's unfairness justifies taking whatever you can. David told me months ago that Victoria truly believed she deserved whatever she could grab. I've thought about that a lot. Life had been unfair to me too. I'd lost my husband, struggled to make ends meet. But I never believed hardship gave me the right to steal from anyone. "Have you heard anything about her family?" I asked David over coffee one morning. "They've scattered," he said. Her parents moved to Arizona to stay with an aunt. Her brother found work out of state. They're starting over. I felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. Victoria's choices had wrecked more lives than mine. Her parents lost their home and savings. Her brother's children were uprooted, all because she chose deception over honesty. I've been thinking about writing them a letter, I said. Really? What would you say? David asked. That I don't blame them. That I hope they're doing okay. They didn't deserve to pay for her decisions. We sat in a comfortable silence, watching a family of ducks glide across the lake. Simple moments like this were new to me. Time to breathe, to enjoy small pleasures without the weight of constant survival. I have something to tell you, David said, his tone shifting. I've been seeing someone. Her name is Jennifer. She's a forensic accountant. She actually investigates financial fraud. She knows the whole story and isn't the least bit interested in my money. I smiled. A forensic accountant? That feels poetic, David laughed. She told me on our third date that I'm too trusting. Smart woman, right? When do I get to meet her? I asked. Only when I'm sure, he said. This time, I'm moving slowly. I'm learning to trust my own judgment again. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. I'm proud of you. After he left, I walked the property, admiring the garden I'd shaped into something truly mine. A vegetable patch, a reading nook beneath the oak tree, a bird feeder alive with cardinals and blue jays. The house was no longer evidence of a crime. It was the story of my own choices. That afternoon, I made a call I'd been planning for weeks. Mrs. Henderson? This is Margaret Harrison. I'm not coming back to work. A pause. Are you feeling all right, Margaret? I'm better than I've been in years, I said, smiling. I'm retiring. The word felt almost unreal. I'd once assumed I'd work until my body gave out. But with the recovered funds, the lake house, and David's steady support, I could finally stop scrubbing other people's floors and start living for myself. That evening, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset turn the water gold and pink. My phone buzzed. David, again. Jennifer wants to know if you like Italian food. She'd like to cook for you next weekend. I texted back, tell her I love Italian food. She doesn't have to impress me. I already like anyone who makes you happy. As darkness settled over the lake, I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago. Tired, anxious, and quietly desperate. She would never have believed this peace was possible. Victoria stole 2 years of my life, but in a strange way, her actions revealed something I might never have discovered otherwise. My own resilience, my capacity for forgiveness. Not for her, but for myself and for David, who had been deceived as well. She tried to steal my future. All she managed to do was delay it. Now this life is fully mine. I choose calm over anger, presence over revenge. I choose peace. And now I'm curious about you. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever faced a betrayal that forced you to rebuild? Share your story, or just the city you're watching from, in the comments below. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. On the final screen, you'll see 2 more of our channel's favorite stories, ones that might surprise you just as much.